My parents gave the $5,000 my grandfather left me for college to my sister. Now, karma is hitting them hard. I'm 18, going through a tough time in my life. Not that my life was ever easy. It's always been difficult, thanks to my narcissistic parents and their golden child. I have an older sister, Mandy, who's 24, and she's been the bane of my existence for as long as I can remember. Since childhood, my parents have been incredibly biased toward her. Because of them, I never had a happy childhood. My sister wasn't exactly a bully, but she's clever and opportunistic. She never missed a chance to exploit our parents' feelings to get what she wanted. I don't entirely blame her. My parents raised her that way. As the eldest, she holds a special place in their hearts. But I'm their child too. I understand that many parents have a favorite child, and that's fine, until it makes the other feel unwanted. That's what my parents did to me. They made my life miserable, and I felt like a spare part in the house. Most of the time, I wore Mandy's old clothes because they were too good to throw away. I played with her hand-me-down toys for the same reason. Why buy new ones when hers were still in decent condition? The only time I got a new dress was at Christmas, and that was just to save face in front of my grandfather and other guests. To avoid being judged by friends and relatives, I'd get one outfit with shoes and accessories for Christmas, while Mandy got as many as she wanted. If I ever complained, Mom would say, "Don't be impatient. Your turn will come next year." As a child, I believed her logic, but when I began to understand the situation, I started protesting. In response, I'd either be told we were too poor to buy new clothes for me, or I'd be punished for my behavior. I don't recall Mom ever asking what I wanted for dinner or cooking my favorite meals. Everything revolved around Mandy's preferences, whether it was Christmas, Thanksgiving, or any other occasion. One time I refused to eat the food and walked away from the table. I was punished by being denied food until I apologized to everyone and washed the dishes for an entire week. It's exhausting to recount all these stories, but that's how it was. Do you know why my parents, especially my mom, treat me this way? It's because of her own sister. My mom suffered at the hands of her own narcissistic parents, so she made sure to become one herself. See the irony? Mom is the eldest of two sisters. She says her parents spoiled her younger sister and gave her everything, while Mom was left to endure their biases. To make up for that, she decided not to spoil her younger child, me, but her eldest, Mandy. I feel like Mom sees herself in Mandy and treats her the way she wished she had been treated. By the time I finished elementary school, I was so resentful of my parents and sister that I started spending my summers with my paternal grandfather. He was the only person who truly loved me. My grandfather didn't like my mom very much. I think he could see through her nonsense. Maybe that's why he always supported me. When I finished elementary school, my grandfather invited me to stay with him on his farm. I felt so relieved. I'd never felt so free and relaxed. He gave me everything I asked for. I feel a little guilty admitting it, but I took full advantage of his love. I asked for everything I couldn't get at home: dresses, Barbies, doll houses, video games, everything I'd ever dreamed of but my parents refused to buy. I loved spending time with him on the farm, surrounded by nature. He had a poultry farm and a small stable with 4 or 5 horses. I'd spend my days with them, and life felt so much more fun back then. When it came time for high school, I begged to be enrolled in a school near my grandfather's farm so I could stay with him. My parents were more than happy to get rid of me, so I stayed with him starting my first year of high school. It worked out for both of us. He was getting older and needed help, and I needed an escape from my toxic family. In my second to last year of high school, my grandfather fell ill. Maybe he knew his end was near because he gathered the family and revealed his will. He left his farm and stable to 2 of my uncles, $50,000 in savings to my dad, and from that, $5,000 was specifically set aside for me to pay for my college education. He made me promise I'd complete my education. Mom was unhappy because other family members received properties and a farm, while Dad only got some cash. My grandfather reminded her that Dad had already sold his share of the property years ago to pay off debts and start a business. Just as I started my senior year of high school, my grandfather passed away. It was the saddest day of my life. I had no one else to turn to and was forced to move back in with my parents. It wasn't pleasant. I hated it, and they hated it too. As graduation approached, I asked my parents for the $5,000 my grandfather had left me. I needed it to apply to colleges. That's when the trouble began. Every time I brought up the money or mentioned college, they'd make strange faces and avoid the topic. Eventually, I lost my patience and demanded to know what was going on. That's when Mom admitted they had given the money to my sister to start her business. I was furious. That money was meant for my education. They dismissed it, saying it wasn't a big deal and that I could wait a year because I was too young for college anyway. I was shocked. How could I be too young for college when my classmates, who were the same age as me, were already getting admitted? When I pushed back, they begged me to give them a year to save up for my tuition. I argued back, saying, "Why can't your golden child wait a year to start her business? I can't afford to lose a year. What should I do from here? Is there any way to get that money back?" Update 1. A lot has happened over the past few months. My parents asked me to wait another year for the money, but I refused and kept pressuring them. They became furious and started calling me selfish and wicked, trying to manipulate the situation. On top of that, my sister Mandy launched a campaign to make me look like the bad guy. I lost my temper when my cousin told me Mandy had been telling everyone that I was jealous of her business and wanted to ruin her. That was the final straw. I told my mom that if they didn't give me my money, I would let everyone know they had violated my grandfather's will and given my college fund to their useless daughter. Mom exploded in anger and said, "If you want to take it that far, start paying rent and buying your own food. Calculate the money we've spent on you over the past 18 years, and we'll call it even." I was stunned. How could they say such a thing while still fully supporting Mandy, who is 24, divorced, and has a child? Despite always excelling in school, my parents have never been proud of me. Meanwhile, their golden child has brought nothing but shame to the family, yet they continue to stand by her. To give some background, while I was living with my grandfather, Mandy got pregnant by her boyfriend. By the time she found out, it was too late for an abortion, so she had to break the news to my parents. They were disappointed, but there wasn't much they could do. Being a conservative Christian, Mom forced her to marry him. Neither Mandy nor her boyfriend wanted the marriage, but Mom didn't give them a choice. Her boyfriend was a lazy bum who didn't want to get married or take responsibility for the child. After the baby was born, he abandoned Mandy and their son. My parents tried to confront him, but he had proof that Mandy had mentally abused him, so he filed for divorce. Left with no other choice, my parents brought Mandy and her child back home. Since my grandfather passed away, my mom has essentially been raising Mandy's child because Mandy is frequently out of the house. Sometimes Dad gets frustrated with Mandy for dumping her child on Mom, but Mom always defends her, saying Mandy is busy looking for a job. That's not true. I've seen her hanging out at local cafes and parks with different guys. Mandy dropped out of school, so she struggles to find a decent job. I couldn't care less about her situation, but when she couldn't find work, she insisted that Mom give her money to start her business. Despite everything, my parents supported her and handed over the money, without even consulting me. Until I shared my story here, I had no idea what my options were to recover the money besides asking them. So, the next time I asked for the money and they resisted, I told them I'd sue them for violating my grandfather's will. Their faces turned pale. They finally understood I wasn't the naive little girl they could exploit anymore. Ever since I came back from my grandfather's house, I'd started standing up for myself, and when I threatened to sue them, they completely lost it. For them, it was unbelievable that I wasn't the vulnerable, compliant daughter anymore. Mom grabbed a notebook and started scribbling down the expenses they had incurred on me over the years. I mean, she literally put a quarter of the household expenses in my name, then added my school tuition and Christmas dress. I was dumbfounded as I watched her write it all out. At the end, she said, "Forget about the $75,000. You owe us $200,000. Pay that before you ask for your damn $75,000. We had a heated argument, and I stormed out of the house. After walking for an hour, I took a bus to my grandfather's house, where my uncle now lives. I asked for my grandfather's journal and found the number of his lawyer. I called the lawyer, explained the situation, and asked if he could help. He assured me that I have a legal right to the $75,000 my grandfather left for me, and that it's his responsibility to ensure everyone gets what's stipulated in the will. He said he would send an official notice to my parents demanding they return the money. If they refuse, I can take legal action. That was such a relief to hear. The notice will reach them within a week. I'm happy to have help, but I'm also equally worried about how my parents will react once they receive the notice. Only God knows what they'll do to me next. Update 2. This will be a short update. I just wanted to let you know that you were absolutely right when you said my parents would kick me out. I was mentally prepared for the inevitable. I talked to a friend about sharing her apartment with me and took a part-time job at a cafe. The pay is very low, but they let me take leftover food at closing time. I had already packed my things a day before the lawyer's notice arrived. As expected, my mom kicked me out as soon as she received the notice. She screamed insults at me and threw my belongings out of the house. I made the mistake of not leaving earlier, which allowed them to enjoy throwing me out. Mom said I was like a snake they had been feeding in their backyard, one that had grown up only to betray and bite them. I shouted back, saying they hadn't left me any other choice. I can't risk my life and career because of their narcissism. The lawyer had given my parents a month to respond to the notice, and the deadline is approaching. It seems like they're not taking it seriously. Mandy even called me to insult me for doing this to the family. She told me my parents weren't going to give me a single cent, and that there was nothing I could do about it, because I didn't have the money to sue them. I stayed silent as she went on, but when I couldn't take it anymore, I hung up on her. I told the lawyer about everything, and he reassured me that we could definitely file a lawsuit if my parents don't respond by next week. Let's see what happens. Update 3. I faced severe backlash from my parents for suing them. I didn't want to file criminal charges against them, but they left me no choice. I thought the lawyer's notice would resolve things, but they ignored it. I went to their house to tell them they should comply with Grandpa's will, or I'd have to pursue legal action. They all turned against me, hurling insults. Mom even threw things at me. I had left some non-essential items at home, thinking I'd pick them up later, but Mom took them from my closet and destroyed them in front of me to hurt me. I went there hoping to settle things peacefully, without legal involvement, but they seemed to want to fight. Frustrated, I told my lawyer to proceed with filing charges, and he did so willingly. When they received the court order, they panicked. Dad called me, saying we could settle the matter within the family and avoid a legal battle. Ironically, when I had tried to settle it earlier, they became hostile. Now the ship had sailed, and everything had to go through legal channels. During the court hearings, Dad was ordered to pay me the $75,000 stipulated in Grandpa's will. However, he claimed he didn't have that much money in his bank account and offered to pay $1,000 monthly. My lawyer argued that this wasn't enough to cover my university tuition and living expenses. The court ruled that Dad must cover my tuition and other necessities, including housing and food, up to a minimum of $75,000. If my expenses exceeded this amount, I'd cover the difference. And if they didn't, he'd pay the remaining balance. I wasn't thrilled about continuing to rely on him for money, but I had no other option. Dad doesn't have $75,000 to pay me up front, so this was a compromise. I initially resisted, but eventually agreed after Dad, with tears in his eyes, begged me and promised not to default. However, I warned him that if he or Mom caused any trouble, I'd sue them again and demand compensation for the emotional distress they caused me. He agreed. Meanwhile, Mom and Mandy continued to work against me behind my back. Mandy has been telling everyone that I've given my parents high blood pressure and brought shame to the family by taking them to court. The irony? There was no shame when Mandy got pregnant, but I'm somehow bringing disgrace by simply asking for the money Grandpa left for me. You know what? I don't care anymore. They've labeled me the black sheep of the family, and honestly, I'm happy to embrace it. Update 4. I know it's been a while since I last updated, but I've been busy adjusting to my new life at university. I graduated high school as the top student in my class and sent graduation invitations to my parents, knowing they wouldn't show up. To my surprise, my dad came, and for the first time he told me he was proud of me. It took him 18 years and a court case to realize that I was his child too, someone who needed love and care. Honestly, it doesn't matter anymore. I've moved past it. I quit my cafe job and moved into the university dorms. The money Dad sends, as ordered by the court, covers my tuition, housing, and meals. Beyond that, I'm on my own. I got a part-time job near campus and started tutoring my classmates in math for extra cash. I've always been good at it. Dad has been sending the court-ordered payments, but some of you asked about my relationship with him and where he was while Mom was being cruel to me. So, here's the truth. Dad didn't exist for me during my childhood. He saw everything that was wrong but chose to look the other way. He never questioned Mom's behavior or defended me. In fact, he thought Mom's decisions were reasonable, like making me wear my sister's old clothes because, according to him, Mom was saving money. I've seen Dad struggle financially, so he was always ready to support any cost-cutting measure Mom implemented. As for Mandy's unexpected pregnancy, I don't know much about how Dad reacted. All I know is through relatives and cousins. Mandy's wedding was so low-key that even I didn't know it had happened. I was living with my grandfather at the time and didn't care what was happening at home. Now, if I update you on my current situation, I couldn't be happier. I'm living my dream life, attending university, and doing well academically. My relationship with Dad has improved since the court case, but Mom and Mandy are still bad-mouthing me and trying to paint me as the villain. However, they've had their own issues to deal with. Mandy, unsurprisingly, wasn't capable of running a business. She opened a pet store, which failed miserably. It was obvious from the start that someone like her wouldn't manage it well. She doesn't even like animals. Things got worse when she was pulled over by the police one day and started arguing with them. She ended up spending a few hours in jail because she insulted the officer. Mom tried to defend her, but Dad gave Mom an ultimatum. Either she chose Mandy or him. Mom doesn't work, so she chose Dad and told Mandy to get a job and move out. Mandy tried using her son to emotionally manipulate Dad into letting her stay, but after wasting all that money in the arrest, Dad finally had enough. He kicked her out. She's now living with a friend, though who knows how long that will last. Mandy hasn't contacted me for help, and I doubt she will. Earlier today, as I was writing this update, I reread my first post and it made me cry. I was in such a bad place back then. I had just lost my only support system, my grandfather, and my parents had stripped me of the inheritance he left for me. I was trapped in a toxic household and unable to go to college, with so much uncertainty about my future. All I could see was darkness and hopelessness. But thanks to this community and its support, I'm here now. I still miss my grandfather deeply. He's the reason I'm at university today, my guardian angel, watching over me from wherever he is. Update 5, bonus update. I should have seen this coming, but things have started going back to how they were. After enjoying a relatively peaceful time at university, problems arose again. My dad stopped making the payments as ordered by the court. We had to go back to court. Thankfully, I had some savings from my part-time job in tutoring, so I managed to cover my expenses for a while. But when I started getting notices from the university about overdue tuition, I had to dip into my savings. I then called my dad, with whom I had a better relationship recently. During our conversation, he explained that it had been harder to cover all my expenses lately because my sister had moved back in with them. Apparently, things didn't work out with her friend, and she had to return home. From our conversation, I also realized that my dad was back to doing whatever my mom told him to do. I thought we had moved past all of that, but here we are again, as if nothing had ever happened. I can't believe he's trusting my mom again after everything she's done to me and continues to do. My mom hasn't stopped posting on social media about how much stress I've caused the family. My sister has joined in too. They even claimed I caused my grandfather's death because living with me supposedly made him sick. He was an elderly man and, according to them, didn't have the energy to care for someone like me. I've been talking to my lawyer, and they believe we can go back to court. This time, we're also filing for defamation and emotional abuse. Honestly, I hope it costs her far more than the initial $75,000. Update 6. I know many people like stories with happy endings. This one might not be happy for my family, but for me, it's the best outcome I could have hoped for. The case went back to court, and we filed a claim for the remaining $75,000 my dad owed me. Since he couldn't pay, the judge ordered the seizure of their house. They'll soon have to move as the sale will cover what they owe me, plus some extra costs due to interest. I think the total amount comes to $87,000, but it didn't end there. The defamation lawsuit followed, which added another $25,000. That included compensation for all the emotional abuse I've endured over the years, the things my mom destroyed when I went to retrieve them from their house, and everything that happened afterward. With this new lawsuit, my mom completely lost it. I know it's hard to imagine since she was already a front runner in the Olympics of insanity, but she really outdid herself. One day, she showed up at my university with my sister in tow. It started with her talking to me in a slightly raised voice, but it quickly escalated into a full-blown screaming match. Campus security had to step in. When 2 guards arrived, my mom completely lost control and became aggressive. At first, she tried to hit me but was restrained by one of the security guards. In the process, she elbowed the guard in the nose. Then she started kicking and punching both guards while one held her back. Finally, the police arrived and took her away. She spent a few hours at the station. My sister, who witnessed everything, didn't intervene, but accompanied my mom to the station. This incident gave me even more leverage in my lawsuit, as well as a restraining order against her. As for my dad, we no longer have a relationship. He chose his wife over his daughter. On the bright side, I now have the money to cover my education and maybe even enough left over to help me start living on my own. I'm still working and saving, so things are looking up for me.